Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Smith's 8th grade U.S. history class here from Madonna Middle School. Today we'll be covering your first day of notes, Chapter 1, Section 1. Today your notes are going to cover a variety of topics ranging from the land bridge theory to 3 major civilizations that were around in Mesoamerica, where current day Mexico is, down to Panama, and down into South America. So let's get started. Alright, for the sake of this video, I am not going to ask you to go and watch CNN Student News. You're probably watching this video because you're 1, reviewing for an upcoming quiz or test, so I'm not going to ask you to go back and re-watch all those CNN Student Newses, or 2, you are absent and maybe you missed today for health reasons, which is understandable. I am not going to ask you to go out of your way, try to find the correct CNN Student News, and then watch it. So you can just skip that for today. If you are curious to know how to find it, you can always come see me in class, and I'll gladly show you an easy step-by-step how to get to CNN Student News so you can watch it on your own in case you miss another day. So we'll just move on. Alright, so in class today, we watched our CNN Student News, which again, you don't have to, and then we're going to spend about 15 minutes on our notes. Then I'll modify the mapping activity for you, and then we're going to work on a race response practice. So in class, we worked on that race response practice as a whole class, but because again, you're reviewing for a quiz or test and or you were absent, I'm going to modify that race response practice for you. It's easy to do, and I'll walk you through that step by step when we get to it. All right, so the first 3 things are the things that are essential to know or want to have answered by the end of these notes are these 3 questions right here. So the first question is, how did people get to North and South America? Second question is, were there any major civilizations in North and South America? And the third question, how do we know that there were major civilizations? So we can say, hey, there were major civilizations in North and South America, but how do we actually substantiate that claim or prove it using evidence? And we'll get to that in just a second. So by the end of class today, you should be able to identify and explain what were the 3 major civilizations in the Americas, how they got to the Americas, and where they were geographically located. All right, so on your notes page, you'll see a tree branch or a tree map, excuse me. In that branch, on the left side of your notes page, you'll see a title of that branch called the Land Bridge Theory. All of your notes for this branch are going to come from this PowerPoint slide. Anything that's in color, you need to write down in your note section. So if you go to your tree map, go to the Land Bridge Theory branch, all 3 green bullet points need to be written down in your tree branch on your tree map. Anything in white is not in color, so you do not have to write down that last bullet point, that white one. It's good information, good to know, but it's not pivotal that you'll need to know on your quiz or your upcoming test. Okay, so in the right section under Land Bridge Theory, as you're writing down, make sure you're listening and following along. But the Land Bridge Theory is simply this. It's this theory or this idea of how scientists and historians think that people came from Asia into North and South America. And so what scientists believe is that about 30,000 to 20,000 years ago, there was this big glacier that stretched from Asia to Alaska in North America. And what scientists and historians theorized is that these Native American groups followed animals from Asia into North America. But what happened is, over time, this huge glacier or this ice bridge that connected Asia and Alaska and North America, eventually when the earth heats up, that glacier, that land bridge is going to dissolve and go away. So hence why it's a theory. Scientists can't actually prove there was this huge glacier that connected the two, but as historians and as scientists with evidence that we found from the similarities between Native Americans in Northern Asia and in Northern North America, it makes sense how similar they are, that they possibly came from the same group, same tribes, and just kind of broke off following these herds as they were looking for a food source as they were going along. So the land bridge theory is this idea that Native Americans crossed over from Asia across this glacier, this land bridge, into Alaska, following herds that they were looking for food, and then eventually this land bridge, because it's ice, is just going to dissolve and go away. And so what we realize is that the earliest Native Americans or earliest Americans, the people in North and South America, had to have been nomads or these individuals following around these herds and hunters. So they weren't people in a set civilization or a set society. They were nomads following around these herds of animals as their food source. And what historians also came to realize is that eventually certain groups are going to say, wow, it is way too cold up here in Alaska. Let's head down south. And so they head down south. They realize, man, it is still not hot enough for us. Or maybe they have different climates that they don't like. So they head even further south. And around 8,000 years ago in Mexico, where Native Americans are going to settle, there's going to be a group of people that start growing their own food. So instead of following these animals around looking for better climates, they're going to start to realize, man, how can we set up a society or how can we make life easier for us by growing our food? All right. And what you have to realize in your note section, we've finished our first branch. You can pause the video and go back if you need. We are now in the learning to farm section. So your second branch on your tree map. So right in the middle, again, anything color needs to be written down. So these yellow bullet points or these yellow sentences need to be written down in your notes. So under learning to farm, here we go. So before Native Americans actually created settled civilizations, again, they were nomads. They were hunting for their food, gathering berries, gathering nuts from trees, and using that as their food source. It's not necessarily the most reliable food source, because what if you follow some animals and they take you somewhere where there's not a lot of trees, there's not a lot of berries, there's not a lot of fruit, there's not a lot of vegetation. You're stuck only eating meat, not getting all the nutrients that your body would need to survive. And so what Native Americans started to realize is, man, we need to create a better way of settling down and creating a dependable food source. And so if you're taking agriculture class, this is the basis of where agriculture comes from. So what Native Americans started to do is they started using a process called irrigation, which is where basically, if you've ever been to a beach or you've ever been to a river, you've probably done this with your finger or with a stick. You dig a channel, the water from the river spills out, fills your little tunnel. That's what these Native Americans did. They used irrigation, or they dug these channels where water from the streams or the rivers came through, and then that water went to their crops, which then they dug more channels in through their crop fields, feeding the ground with nutrient-rich water and with nutrients from the microorganisms in the water, making sure that their agriculture, their food source, was able to have water so that it could grow and grow and grow, so they had a dependable food source. And what Native Americans are going to soon realize is, holy smokes, we have this process where we can grow our own food. We no longer have to follow these Native Americans. And so what they do is they start setting up societies because they have something called a surplus or extra food that they know they can rely on in case they have a bad harvest or a bad growing period. So they use the process of irrigation to water their crops so they can grow their crops. Then they're growing more than they need so they can save it, a surplus, so that if they ever have hard times, they know, hey, we have this surplus, we can go and get it from our crop bins or our storage bins at a later time. What happens is Native Americans start to realize, we have all this extra time now because we're not worried about following these herds. We're not worried about growing food just to survive. So they start having extra time. And what these Native Americans start doing is creating complex systems or complex civilizations where they're creating religion, they're creating clothing, they're creating music, they're creating government, all these complex ideas that they have the time to actually create and actually put into practice in their civilization, because they're no longer scrounging for food, looking for a food source, because they're now growing their own food through the process of irrigation. So again, irrigation is not something that we just want to scoot under the rug and say, yeah, irrigation is cool, they started growing crops. Irrigation is what allows civilization to prosper and allows civilizations to grow. So if you had a Gunderson or Felker last year, they probably talked about some of the Nile River Valley, the Indus River Valley, those major river civilizations. That's why people set up civilizations near rivers, because irrigation. You need water to grow crops. Crops lead to a surplus. That surplus allows you to kind of take some time off and start creating what makes your culture unique, like music, art, clothing, religion, your different food styles, and all of that. And so when we talk about the earliest Americans and your last branch on your tree map, again, making sure you're writing down everything in color, what you need to know is that when we call these major civilizations, it's not that any other civilization or any other culture that we're going to talk about is unimportant. We call these the three major civilizations because they're going to create some of the biggest structures as a civilization. So these three civilizations that we're focusing on started off as nomadic hunters, came across the land bridge theory, or that land bridge from Asia to Alaska, moved down south, basically into Mexico and South America, and they started using irrigation to start growing their crops and had a surplus so they could create these complex civilizations. These three major civilizations are the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Incas. And what's interesting about the Mayas is that the Mayas are located on present-day Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula. They were around between 250 AD and 900 AD, and they were this complex civilization that had calendars. They created these giant step pyramids. They had rituals or for religious ceremonies inside the top of these pyramids. So very complex. The interesting thing about the Mayas is that they disappeared. Historians aren't sure if they were conquered by another group because the ruins are left pretty well intact. They aren't sure if the Maya just abandoned their civilizations because of religious reasons or for governmental reasons. But all that we know is that the Maya disappeared into the surrounding area and we're not sure what happened to them. So you have the Mayas, interesting group, complex civilization. The second of these three major civilizations are known as the Aztecs. And the Aztecs kind of have an interesting beginning story is because they were this nomadic tribe wandering around, but then their shamans had these visions that if they see a cactus with an eagle on top with a snake in its mouth, that's where they would set up their capital city of Tenochtitlan or Tenochtitlan, which is current Mexico City. And so the Aztecs are these nomadic groups. They're wandering around. They see the cactus with the eagle on it with the snake in its mouth, so they set up their capital city of Tenochtitlan. Very complex civilization. They also have step pyramids. They also have complex religion. They also have complex government. Their chiefs in the Aztec culture would actually go up to the top of these pyramids every day. They would take a thorny branch and basically run it through their tongue as a way of bloodletting for their religion. And that bloodletting of the king was a way of appeasing their gods and goddesses. So that way the gods and goddesses wouldn't rain down fury on the Aztecs. And the Aztecs would have a prosperous civilization and kingdom. And they actually do until Europeans come, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Aztecs have a very thriving civilization. They actually build basically Tenochtitlan on an island. Again, current Mexico City. And they create food, crops, agriculture, and have a complex government and religion. All right, so we talked about the Maya. They disappeared. Aztecs create a complex civilization. The last group that we're going to talk about today are the Inca. They are the largest empire, and they're going to occur largely in South America. Inca rulers are going to also have a complex religion, have complex government. They're going to wear a lot of precious metals to establish their wealth and their dominance over other individuals in the kingdom. The Aztecs are also going to have, as you can see in this picture, human sacrifice. So what this individual was, she's, I believe, like a preteen or young teenager. She was a virgin. She was left on a mountaintop as an appeasement for their gods and goddesses. So instead of necessarily bloodletting from a king, like the Aztecs did, the Incas are using children's sacrifice to appease their gods and goddesses, showing that there is some type of formal religion, some type of government that's enforcing these religious practices. Also, the Incas are going to have a complex road system, which is going to connect all of these mountaintop cities that the Incas were able to build in the Andes Mountains in South America. And so Machu Picchu is what's featured in this picture right here. It's a mountaintop city. How do we know the Incas were a major civilization? Well, they were able to create these ginormous structures, city structures across all of these mountaintop regions, and the roads connected these different mountaintop towns from place to place, so they were able to escape bombarding tribes or tribes that were trying to take them over. They would follow the roads and then go to another mountaintop city and defend that mountaintop city so they would no longer hopefully be captured or taken over. The Incas are also going to be taken over and basically killed off by Europeans, but that is a story for another time. So these three major civilizations that we talked about today all used irrigation. They all had to have come across from Asia into Alaska following that land bridge theory, and those three civilizations are the Mayas, who are going to disappear, the Aztecs and the Incas, who are going to be conquered by Europeans later on, but they all have complex religious systems, complex buildings, complex governments that make them unique civilizations. All right, so we also worked on a mapping activity in class. I am not going to ask you to look at my gorgeous map that I made for you guys, but I'm gonna instead say, come find a classmate or come find me, and I will gladly help you map out all the things that you need on your map in your notes page. What I would like you to do is work on this race response. So in class, what we did is I pulled up the race response on the board, everyone was logged into Edmodo, and we all wrote a class race response of how you should answer this question. I had individuals contribute, raising their hand, everyone else was typing down what we were writing on as the board, and we basically wrote this class paragraph as a whole entire group. Since you're not in class or you're reviewing for a test, what I want you to do is try to write this out. Answer these two questions of how did individuals get to North and South America, and where did the three major culture groups that we talked about, or these three major civilizations, settle their empires or their civilizations. So if you're a little confused, let me restate it. The questions that you need to answer for your race response are this: how did individuals get to North and South America, and where did these three major culture groups settle their civilizations? So as you're writing this race response, think about what theory led to individuals getting to North and South America. Where did it start and where did it end? What kind of people crossed over getting into North and South America? And then where in the world did these major civilizations or culture groups set up, these three major ones that we talked about? And also, how do you know that they were major civilizations? What discussion topics did we talk about in our notes section that allows you to know that these were major civilizations? Make sure that you bring in your notes, make sure that you bring in your blank map, and I'll help you fill that out, and make sure you bring in this race response practice. I'll give you some feedback, and I hope to see you in class, and until the next time.